Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue of Southeast Asia TV. Tonight we have the pleasure to have a guest coming from quite far away, from Dubai. And I just couldn't help to invite him to the studio because he's working on something quite interesting for the country. You know, it's the Monitor Group, and his name is Chris Malone. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much.
So you came for a RISE conference.
I did indeed. I was here. It's my first visit to Cambodia,
Yes.
And I was here for what was a very impressive global RISE conference that took place yesterday.
Well, you know, the beauty of this dialogue is that it's very impromptu, and that's why today I have Chris. And the reason I got him over is that it's something that preoccupied this economy quite a bit for quite a long time, is on the issue of competitiveness. And I think the Monitor Group have such a big expertise in that. And I will ask Stuart foremost to say a bit about yourself, so for the audience.
Sure.
But a bit also about the Monitor Group, you know,
Sure.
the background a bit, your role in the world, and then we can tack on a bit on the issue of competitiveness for this country.
Great. Well, competitiveness is it's really central to the Monitor Group. We were set up by one of the world's leading thinkers in the field of competitiveness, which is Professor Michael Porter from the Harvard Business School.
Yes.
And we were set up in the early 1980s.
Yes.
And since then, we've worked in something like 100 different countries and regions around the world, helping local governments, and often local governments combined with private sector leaders, to drive forward the competitiveness of the country or a particular industry. And so I've had the pleasure of working in many different parts of the world on this type of thing, from Portugal through to Germany, more recently in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and I've also spent a lot of time working in the Middle East, which is one of my responsibilities.
So you hold two head, you're a senior partner of the group, but as well a country director in Vietnam right now, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. No, because for me it's a relevancy, you know, international best practice could be great, but if transposed in another place that is not the same, it could be creating some distortion. But the fact that you've been operating with a neighboring country which share very much similar thing, we could learn a lot from you. On competitiveness, how do you see Cambodia, generally first?
Well, one way to look at the competitiveness, an easy metric for competitiveness is these international rankings.
Yes.
Cambodia, I think, is number 109 in the global competitiveness ranking, which is from the World Economic Forum. And I think that's that gives us a clue to the competitiveness of Cambodia. But one needs to look deeper into these different the component parts of the ranking, or into different rankings, to get a sense of where the competitiveness is today. But if there was one thing that I could, an early observation I could make from our study of Cambodia, it is that the competitiveness of Cambodia is defined rather by its local market. You know, there are healthy local industries such as the rice industry that have thrived and been really successful in the local market. But competitiveness is really a global game. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how that industry evolves as it starts to become more export-oriented.
Exactly. I can help say that I met a lot of Cambodian entrepreneurs, and one of the message I keep telling them that, yes, it's good that you've been growing as an entrepreneur, but you know, you can only grow so long as an entrepreneur. You have to move into a corporate setting, a corporate mindset. You have to think of competition. You know, you have to first maybe nationally, and you have to succeed nationally first before you can go regionally, before even globally. But Chris, perhaps maybe you should set the context a bit, the parameter of competitiveness, you know, all this, the diamond, the cluster and everything. Just demystify in plain English to the crowd.
Well, very good. Competitiveness, ultimately, competitiveness is simply about productivity.
Yes.
And productivity is what drives the prosperity of the people in the country.
Yes.
And that ultimately comes down to the efficiency with which you can produce a product and the price that you can realize in international markets.
Yes.
So that's really where competitiveness focuses on. That's the ultimate objective, raising standards of living by having more successful businesses in the country. Now, the journey of competitiveness goes through a number of different stages. So at different stages of development, different things would be important. Now, currently, Cambodia is what we refer to as a factor-driven economy, and that means that it's really competing on cost. It's mostly competing on
cost.
Relatively unprocessed products, commodities that will only find success in the markets if they can be low cost. And as the country develops and it starts to process more products and produce more sophisticated products, then it's going to compete on unique value. Then the challenge of competitiveness will be different. But I would say, the top priority today, given that Cambodia is competing on cost, is to get scale.
Scalability.
Scalability, but also critical mass. And I think that's that would be one of the areas of concern for us as we think about the Cambodian economy.
Because our market is small, right? Because
your
our
market
country
is small.
right?
Indeed. Small can be beautiful.
I see.
Small can be very valuable. Small can be very successful. But today, as you point out, Cambodia is a small market. But this issue of size is compounded by the fact that your companies, for example, in the rice industry, are fragmented. And they're very small. And they're subscale. And historically, this has been fine because it's been
you're in the domestic market.
Domestic market. It's a local market.
So it's a local market.
So it hasn't created challenges. And
So you would say, for this transformation to succeed, there have to be a paradigm shift.
Absolutely.
In the way of thinking.
Perfectly put. I think the biggest transformation when one moves from a local industry to an export-oriented global industry is a change of perspective. It's a change of perspective that allows participants in the industry to realize what they're up against. So, for example, there's a very positive and a very helpful target that the government has put forward of 1 million tons of export by 2015. We think that's great. We think that's a good target. But we have our concerns about that target because of some of the bottlenecks in the supply chain in the country that exists today. So, we're not concerned that it's impossible. We're more concerned that participants in the industry think they're already on that trajectory. We're not quite so sure. We think quite a lot of work will need to be done to get there.
I can resound that concern because, when you talk about exporting, rice, there's two types of rice. One, the flagrant, where you can fetch high price. You can ship by container because you can fetch $900 per ton. It's all right to pay $2,000 per container for a container that can only accommodate 20 tons. But when you start moving into the short, a 3 months grain at $400, there is no way you can accommodate $2,000 per container of freight cost, right? So to me, yes, we realize that in the government, when the government tasked a task force to do the strategic review, one of the message is clear that we will not make it the 1 million ton if we go purely by container. We have to look at other mode of transport, break bulk, for example. We have to maximize the use of the Mekong River to Khai Map, the deep sea port in Vietnam, for example. So it's clear we have to think of integrated logistics, that sort of thing. But that's one thing. But a little bit more upstream, I see also the issue of critical mass is not, as a whole we have, but because we fragmented, we don't have.
Right.
We have a lot of rice, but it's all compartmentalized by the few trader, a few miller, a few rice producing thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
But they do not come together as one
absolutely, yeah,
critical mass.
Absolutely, and you know, it's on this issue that one can start at the beginning of the value chain and look all the way down and find this fragmentation and find these bottlenecks and find these challenges. Before talking about the further up the value chain, I wanted to pick up on something that you said about the ports and the transport. You know, to go back to the global rankings. There's a very useful ranking, which is the global logistics ranking, precisely. So the logistics ranking, you know, if you look at some of your neighbors, Vietnam, for example, it's number 53 in the world. I mean, there's some 180 countries ranked in these rankings. You're familiar with them. Vietnam is number 53. Cambodia is number 129. So when you think about competition and you think about the ability to get to the market, this type of thing is a significant bottleneck and it needs to be addressed.
Well, I would say that perhaps Vietnam, as being a coastal state with deeper seaport infrastructure built during the Vietnam Wars, probably have an edge there, right?
I think that's exactly right.
Cambodia deep seaport now has a big handicap in the sense that it's not deep enough for bigger vessel. I see a breakthrough a bit now, the fact that Phnom Penh port that used to be thought as a sub-feeder port, now it's become a feeder port going down to Khai Map and then go further on, right? So to me, the logistic issue is one thing, right? But taking into account this sort of like unchangeable, you know, geological, you know, status there. What are the options to break this to narrow down this gap so that we become logistically more competitive?
Well, I think you're absolutely right about the Vietnamese. They do have an advantage in the sense that it's a coastal, you know, it's a littoral country and they have multiple access points. But it's a large country. It's a large country. And that can bring a disadvantage, whereas Cambodia is a small country. You know, the amount of investment required to upgrade the infrastructure in the country, I think it's a significant amount. But compared to the capital required to upgrade Vietnam, it's significantly smaller. So I think, you know, what we would recommend the country does is take a look, start with the target, start with the 1 million ton target, and work back from that. And think about all the bottlenecks that exist across the value chain. And then think about the type of investment that's going to be required to debottleneck it. The type of infrastructural investment, the type of regulatory reforms that will be required to shift products at speed, and then to really work through that in a very focused manner. But we talk a lot about the 1 million target. It should be noted that the 1 million target is also an internal target. It's an internally set target. It doesn't reference any global
It is our objective, it's an ambitious objective.
It's an ambitious objective, but we would be, you know, keen to see Cambodia set some targets for itself in the global context. Why not target being number 5 rice exporter in the world? Why not target in these competitiveness rankings or logistics rankings? Why not target getting in the top 50? You know, these are important global references.
We should break out of our cocoon.
Absolutely,
you know, and then project ourselves in a bit in the world. And I think this is a good thing because, you know, next year Cambodia will have the opportunity to chair the ASEAN.
It's a great opportunity.
And trade facilitation is definitely one on the agenda because ASEAN connectivity, that sort of thing, the GMS. So yes, Chris, thanks for this idea because, you know, all along you're right. We've been more internally focused because we feel that is more within our control, you know. But again, being in control of our own cocoon is very different than being out there under the pressure, the push and pull of the neighbor, right? And we feel already that being next to Vietnam and Thailand being the top 2 rice exporter,
it puts a lot of pressure.
It put a lot of pressure.
But at
the same time, you know, at the same time, you feel motivated also
Yeah.
And you know, psychologically, one of the things that is quite interesting that I have spot when we have developed this rice policy, and 5 or 6 months down the road after we launch a policy, the Prime Minister launched a policy, you know, there's a feeling of can-do attitude.
Good.
Because you see, all along, the neighbor, I mean, if I'm the neighbor, I would say the same thing, that look, because for me, my selfish goal is to get your paddy, right?
Right.
So it's not into my advantage to tell you, guy, you should develop your export.
Yeah.
You say, look, export's so difficult, come on, standard, everything. Look, guys, you know, here's a cash, I'll buy you paddy, just plan for the next crop and go get drunk, right?
Right.
So you see, and to be fair, in those days, those guys believe it because they do not see a clear direction from the government.
Right, and they're fearful of the risks associated with this.
Exactly.
And so on.
And you see, you know, all along there's a sense of distortion also, because before we grew, you know, export doing well, but primarily because of a garment.
Right.
But as you know, garment is not a Cambodian factor.
Yes.
If you look at all the factory, it's mostly foreign owned, with a foreign competitive mindset, a foreign competitive agenda, practice, experience, your network, right?
Right.
The rice is the first time ever that we have a domestic agenda driven.
Yeah.
And
that's an exciting thing.
That's why it's so critical that we help them
Yeah.
move beyond the domestic thing to a global, or at least regional.
Indeed, and to move to the region, I mean, as you know, I've spent a lot of time in Vietnam, and I would say that the Vietnamese, they would say about themselves, they find themselves in more of a similar situation than it might appear at first. They have the challenges of moving out from a largely internally focused economy. They have the concerns of the risk that comes with that and openness and so on. And they have a rather archaic planning system. But the one thing that's really impressed us about the Vietnamese is that they have been willing to take advice and help from the outside, and that's how we got involved.
Yes, yes.
And we were asked by Prime Minister Dung to work with a couple of regions, first of all in the south, to partner with some of the up-and-coming, aggressive provincial chairmen who have a vision for their province, but who needed, at least as far as the Prime Minister was concerned, they needed a sense of realism, but also a partner to help accelerate them towards their objectives. And that's where we came into the equation. So this is one of the ways that Vietnam has managed to open itself up a little bit without losing control, without exposing itself completely to the market. But it's opened itself up, but at the same time it's worked with global partners like ourselves to bring that global perspective and to partner with them to accelerate their implementation of their plans. And they've had some quite impressive results through that.
Chris, you know, I always go back now to this 1 million target, right? Because that's where everything have to work backward. And I find that if you look at the market, only 10%, you know, of the rice export are high value, the perfume jasmine rice, right? The other, it means that the 90% is not. And to me, if the market only bear 10% for the jasmine, you know, where we're going to sell the 90% of the non-jasmine of this. So at the $400 or $500, you know, it's more for the regional market. You know, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, where hundreds
these
of
are
millions,
tough competitive markets.
Hundreds of millions of people who would be a key target for that. But these markets are more state regulated. You know, the National Food Authority of the Philippines, Bulog, Banas, Malaysia is there. Here I see also the need to work on the G2G as well. What's your view on that?
Well, I would say when it comes to the selection of the different products that are going to drive your export growth, there's one thing that I think, you know, having been through this transition with a few different industries, agricultural industries in a few different countries, there's one thing that you need to bear in mind, which is the chances are that 80% of your growth is going to come from 20% of your products.
I see.
And the only...
So are you saying that we should don't lose sight of this jasmine perfume rice, right?
Well, and on that, I could I could give you a point of view on the products, but my point of view would be uninformed at this point. I think it's very important that that the industry lets the market influence the products that are going to succeed. And there's a serious risk if one is too dirigiste or one is too internally focused about the products that are going to export. There's a serious risk of wastage. A serious risk of wastage.
So don't pick the loser, don't pick the winner.
Let the market decide.
Let the market decide.
Expose yourself to the market. I mean, if you want to get ahead of the market, you can conduct studies, investigations into the dynamics of the market and so on. And that's a very worthwhile thing doing.
I see.
But the market will signal in terms of what products are successful.
I have to share with something that relate to that, because when we have the rice policy, the Ministry of Agriculture is promoting 10 seed of rice, right?
Right, yeah. And it was announced at the conference yesterday.
Yeah, you're right. And when we talk to the exporter, they only say that the market only, can pick only 3 that they find a buyer. I'm not saying that the other 7 seed is not good, but it is the market, is the buyer that comes, no, we like these 3. So this is a good example where
that's a perfect example.
It is the market who dictate, not we dictate, here is my seed, here is my type, and you sell it.
And the core products and the niche products that are dictated by the local market will not be the core products and the niche products that are dictated by the global market. They will be different. That's the challenge.
Chris, we're almost running out of time, but I have to link this policy dimension, because competitiveness has a lot to do with policy intervention. Maybe I shouldn't use the word intervention, but you see now in the rice sector the dynamics of the private sector, right? But you also see the effort of the government, right? How do you bring this partnership, this public-private sector dialogue, to make sure that both are looking at the same direction and working together?
That's a great question. That's a really, the countries that can solve this issue are the ones that succeed. And I would, I'd like to give you an example of good private-public collaboration and the different roles that the private sector and the public sector can play. We've done a lot of work around the world in the rice industry. In India, in Africa, in Asia. And one of the things that we were very interested in investigating is how you could make the market work for the smallholder farmers. Because as you know, in the rice industry, a large amount of the farmers are smallholder farmers. So we refer to the kind of the bottom 60, the 60% of the farmers who have less than a hectare. And one of the things that we found really, really fascinating is that the private sector can drive increase of productivity across the whole of the value chain with relatively little direct intervention by the government. I'll give you an example. An example from some of our work in India. The farmers are all selling their rice at the same time. This depresses the rice. This depresses the price that they realize it all comes onto the market at the same time. But there's actually a role for warehousing. And when warehousing comes into the value chain, it's possible to smooth out the supply throughout the year. And the farmers can go to the warehouse and they can take a receipt from the warehouse receipt system, which is a bankable receipt. It's security. And what this means is that they can then go and get inputs, or they can even raise cash off it. But the supply is smoothed throughout the year. The beauty of this is that not only can you increase the price realization for the farmers, but the warehousing system can be a profitable business in itself, and can attract investors. And so there's so much inefficiency in some of these supply chains that you can create value and create new businesses and create jobs without any intervention from the government. Now, the government's role in this is to facilitate, is to help the partners to work together, to encourage people to collaborate, to point out the opportunities. But aggressive policy intervention and participation from the government is unnecessary. So this is a key thing for us in the rice, making the markets work for the poor.
The good news is that we've been thinking of this sort of warehouse, we call a rice bank a bit, but
Yeah.
we're still in the thinking mode, because we're looking that in a few years down the road, we'd like to have something along that line, but by region, right? You know, like
Right.
on the southern part near Vietnam, different type of approach, more for that type of 3 months rice, but also the northern, northeast part. So,
Right.
so I think we're on the same wavelength there. Chris, your last word on Cambodia competitiveness and on the rice competitiveness.
I think it's a very exciting time for the country. I think that the rice industry has got the potential to be a catalyst for change
Yes.
throughout the whole country,
Okay.
to help drive the performance of Cambodia on these international rankings
Okay.
up,
Yeah.
and to be the engine that pulls the country forward. So I think it is, you know, as other players in the region start to think more about industrialization, they may take their eye off the ball in terms of rice and agriculture.
Yeah.
And I think now's the time for Cambodia to jump on that opportunity.
All right.
And I think it presents a very interesting opportunity to upgrade both the competitiveness of the country as a whole and create a lot of prosperity.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to come
It's a pleasure.
on a short notice, on a day notice, to come to share with us, particularly with the Cambodian here, is the view on Cambodia competitiveness. And I think it's important, as I always now, I have another artificial timeline, which is next year ASEAN chairmanship.
Right.
I feel that after 20 years, you know, following the Paris Peace Accord, which was signed in '91, we do well next year, we could say we graduate. We could say we're not anymore a post-crisis country. We're a normal country, subject to the same normal competitiveness pressure, you know, and we should be behaving as a, you know, normal country that need to compete.
Agreed.
And perhaps this rice sector could be the beginning of many new beginning in other products. So thank you so much for sharing with us your perspective, the wisdom, but foremost the best practice of other places around the world.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Yeah, thanks. So Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, for this impromptu meeting, I think we got a lot of good idea. I have a lot of good idea to follow up on the rice sector, but I have to say that it's been quite an insightful discussion on not only the rice sector competitiveness, but also the dimension how the rice sector could help catapult a bit the national ranking or competitiveness ranking of the country in the larger global ranking. So on that note, I hope you learned something from this experience. So good night, and see you next week.